the journey of life, and you start learning. That is how you learn to prioritize. So it's like when I knew what burnout felt like within my business, it was easier for me to identify it in my personal life. Like, oh, this marriage is burning me out. You know what I mean? Like this form of parenting is burning me out, and then I was like, I kind of know what I need to do to get back. But that was like probably the biggest thing that I've learned along the way that I wish people knew, that it's not something that you can buy our easy hack to figure out your non-burnout systemization and automation, whatever, like not real life. You're going to burn out, but once you know better, you got to do better.
This is the Goal Digger Podcast.
So there are these people in your life where you are like orbiting in different spaces, but you're waiting. You're just waiting for the moment that you get to align. And so today feels very special because my guest today is someone that I have watched, admired, seen, experienced from afar. And all of a sudden we get on today and it's like we've known each other for a decade. Nicole Walters, it is about time you showed up on the Goal Digger Podcast.
Look, it is about time, but it's the right time. Timing is everything, and I'm just so grateful that we're finally mushed together. It's a good thing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know you, you are a founder, you're a CEO, you're a podcaster, you are an author, you are all of these things, but you weren't always these titles. Can you tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you got to where you are today and where it is that you are?
Sure, absolutely. So I know that so many people come on here and they're talking about, here's what I built and here's what I did and all that jazz. But the truth is, I'm a very regular person. I've had many a night of crying in a Target parking lot, eating excessive amounts of cheese, and I'd like to say that's where I started, and that is very much where I still am, but in between all of that, I grew up without much, just a poor kid in Washington, D.C., and my parents are both immigrants from Ghana, West Africa, who did everything to come to this country and do it the right way and follow the rules and all that, but we were still poor. And I grew up knowing that there was just a gap, that I wanted to fill, and I did it the right way. I went to corporate, followed the rules, did all that. And eventually I was like, this ain't it. I quit my 6-figure job and I did it live online in front of 10,000 people and launched my consulting business, which grew to a multi-million-dollar company within about a year and change. And in between all of that, I adopted 3 girls, launched a book, had a TV show on a major cable network, and life has lifed. But here I am today doing all the same things, and I'm really grateful.
Okay, we can't graze over the fact that you quit your job live on the internet. This was the Periscope days, right?
This was when
Periscope,
live streaming was just starting. Yeah.
Yes. And so how did you land to that decision that 1, you were going to quit, but 2, you were going to live stream it? We have to talk about this because so many people are like, wait, what? Okay, walk us through that.
So what's nuts about it was, honestly, it wasn't, because live streaming was new, it wasn't like it was like a marketing thing that I think a lot of people think of. The best thing about my marketing is the fact that it really is me using social media to be social. I've never varied away from the authentic use of social. And that's what it was. I'd been documenting before I decided to quit my journey into entrepreneurship, but I was doing it via live, very organically. Like, hey y'all, today it's been a long day. I filmed. Hey y'all, I am standing in my bathtub with a bed sheet taped to the back of my bathtub and, my phone taped to, a broom, so I can have, because I don't have a tripod, to film the opening sequence to my course. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it was really like bootstrapping and showing people how I was starting with what I had where I was. And in showing that journey, people were like, this is amazing, but like, you're making money, you've had huge launches, like, why are you still in corporate? And I was like, you know what, you're right. Like I'm going to quit. And then everyone was like, well, you've been sharing your journey, share that too. So I called my boss up, quit my job, and I haven't looked back. That was over a decade ago now.
Oh my gosh. Do you want to put your necklace under your shirt and then maybe there you go. That'll be perfect. It just keeps popping and I just don't want to
we don't want a weird noise.
You're good.
For sure.
Okay. So I I remember writing my 2 weeks notice letter and I had my mom proofread it because, I mean, of course, as an adult, you still need your mom to read things like that.
Yes.
So the fact that you had the gumption to do it and do it live, I feel like people really did feel super invested in your journey. So talk to me about that pivot out of corporate and into entrepreneurship. What did it look like? What was your plan? Did you have a plan? Like, how did that all kind of pan out?
Well, one of the things that's great about that pivot to begin with was that I am still just doing the job that I was doing in corporate. So I think for a lot of people, they maybe, as they start building a business around whatever their gifting is, they're stepping into something that can feel totally new. But I scaled businesses from 2 million to 200 million. I worked in Fortune 500. I was a consultant. So for me to just switch my demographic from being large scale, entrepreneurs, which is essentially what a corporation is, to working with everyday entrepreneurs, it wasn't that much of a leap in terms of the knowledge part. Oh, but girl, the feels, okay. I'm telling you, for me, it was all about making sure I was going to be the best boss I ever had. So that meant I needed to prepare a place for me to go. So I made sure I had money in the bank. I made sure that I had a product that I knew was effective. All the things I would do for a corporation, I did for myself. And I made sure that from day one, I would always be able to cut myself an appropriate paycheck and never have to work for free. And I'm really grateful to say that, as a testament to my business that started debt-free without loans, $24 in the bank, that I built a business debt-free and have always paid myself. And that is probably one of my biggest pride points, is that I was able to do that.
I love that. Oh my gosh. So one thing that I love about you is that you tell the story behind the story, right? Because it would be easy to wrap this conversation up right here and be like, and it all worked out and we all lived happily after.
In conclusion.
Yeah, right. And it's not like you have had so many things happen in the middle. Share your story about the girls and how they came into your life and what that looked like, because you experienced so many shifts and things. When people talk about like overnight success, I like to look at the decade, right?
Yes.
And in this last decade, you have had so many transitions and pivots and turns and twists and good and bad and highs and lows. Talk to me about the girls, because this part of the story, I think, is just something we have to hit on.
Yes, thanks. So I know so many people will look at my story or hear it and say, oh yeah, she must be 25 with no responsibilities, never has to wear Spanx, perfect skin, and I will tell you the skin part's true, but I do have to wear Spanx. Like, I am human, So realistically, what happened was, part of why I had to quit my job was I had just adopted 3 girls, and they came into my life when I was driving down the street in Baltimore, where I lived at the time, and I saw their mother panhandling on the side of the street, and she was with at the time, just turned 3-year-old girl. And I pulled over to see what they need, to get them some food, do all those things, and she told me she had 2 more at home. And, I met these 3 incredible girls, ages 3, 11, and 14, and I wanted to be there to support them. I wanted to be there to help the way that I help people now in business. What can I do? Yeah. So I was mentoring, I was helping with school, I was providing meals, but then after a month's time, their mother said that she was going to be incarcerated for substance issues. And so obviously, I think any mom listening now, anyone with the mommy chip even, the aunties are like, what happened to the girls, and that was what I said. And she said, well, I don't want the state to take them, and, maybe they could stay with my boyfriend. And I was like, you know what, I can help still, let me see what I can do. So I was 28. I took custody of these 3 girls, and, realized very quickly that I was going to have 1 in kindergarten in 3 years, 2 in college within 4 years. I needed to make sure we nailed potty training, filled all developmental steps, handled prom, driver's license, and I had about 5 years to get it all done. Plus I needed a bigger house stat, and I just didn't have the hours or the time to commit to corporate anymore. I knew that I needed my time back and I needed to make more money. And that meant working for myself. So that was the why behind the what.
Okay, as a mom, I can't even imagine jumping into such different stages of life for females and like what we all experience. that is like the gamut. Like you like got put through the ringer in a beautiful way because there's so many different needs and desires and emotions and hormones and all of these things. So I just can only imagine it's like literally a crash course in parenting at every developmental stage possible.
Yes. And also, I mean, I'm raising myself. I think that it's
Yeah.
so easy, as I'm approaching my 40s to look back and be like, gosh, I was so young,
Yeah.
and it's weird
Yeah.
because when you're like 28, 26, you feel grown. Like you really
Yeah.
do, because the world is calling you to act like an adult and show up like an adult in a way that's unfamiliar. But the
Yeah.
reality is, I don't even know if at 40 I'm an adult. You know what I mean? Like I still am confused. The kids look at me like, what's for dinner? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, and then I remember I'm the one who's responsible, So it's like,
Right?
so I get
Oh,
it, but I guess that's also one of the beautiful things about that stage is that's the
yeah.
time to be bold. That's the time to take risks. That's the time to see what happens because you've got recovery time in your 30s. And, uh, you know, I try to do the next right thing with my girls. That was what it was all about. And they've been
Yep.
more of a blessing to my life. Now they are 12, 21, and 24, and I'm not even 40 yet. And I've been able to raise these girls through these stages. And it's just the greatest gift, so I'm thankful, I'm really thankful.
Yeah. It's funny. I love how you talk about how you feel so grown up. I feel that all the time. And then all of a sudden I'll like look behind me and I'm like, there's car seats, there's a stroller. Like,
What? How did
who's
I get
responsible for
here?
these children?
How did
Yes.
that, like, sometimes I look at my kids and I'm like, you really think like I'm supposed to keep you alive? You have no idea.
Yeah.
I barely give myself water.
Yeah.
Like I can't keep a plant alive, and here you
Right?
are looking at me, trusting me to have food in the fridge every day. Like,
Right?
and then you remember, like, oh, that naivete is really important for you to like live and do things. So like, do
Absolutely.
take those risks while you're young and stupid, like quitting your job live online and burning all the bridges behind you. Because you'll recover and you won't know any better.
Yes. Amen. I know my sister came over the other night and we do like brain quest while we eat meals. And I was packing a lunch and she's like, oh, you are a mom right now. And I was
Mom.
like,
Yes.
yeah, I
Yes.
get it.
And it's so
One
weird,
thing that I
like
love
siblings. Oh,
that,
sorry.
oh, sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's so interesting with siblings because they are such a reflection, back to you. Because like with the two of you, you're always sort of that youthful sibling dynamic. But then they'll
Yes.
be like, "Why do you have Cheetos in your bag?" And I'm like, "It's a snack for the child." You know what I mean? And they're just
Yeah.
like, "Oh right." It's this weird
Oh,
dynamic.
yes, yes. One saying that I've adopted, especially after writing a book, which we're going to talk about for you, is here's what I know so far. And I think that this guides us into a beautiful part of the conversation because, as we said, you're naive. You think you know it all. You start to do these things. And writing a book can feel so intimidating because you are writing down, here's what I know so far. And I think that at this stage of our games, we have both realized like we don't know it all and we're going to change and evolve. And that's beautiful. But talk to me a little bit about the process, the feelings, everything behind Nothing is Missing, your memoir of living boldly. Talk to me about that.
So I think that the first part is, obviously both of us have shared online pretty transparently that a lot happens behind the scenes. And I think that's what
Yeah.
makes us so similar and also so different from others is that we do share that glimpse of our life. And I don't begrudge people who don't want to openly share their families or don't want to openly share if they're going on a health journey or whatever else, because we all have our own comfort levels, right? But there is something to be said, for demystifying the
Yeah.
actual lifestyle of entrepreneurship. And I think that's the part that people are missing. If you have
Yeah.
access and a glimpse into the lifestyle and not just the outcome, it really can help you on that journey. And that's what happened with Nothing is Missing. Over those years also had to deal with my 17-year-old at the time being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And, she's fine now, but we went through that journey. My eldest one ran into her own substance abuse issues, and now she's a year sober, but like, I had to
Yeah.
manage all of that while managing a business and trying to manage my own health, and so I get, this opportunity to write a proposal for a book. And I'm like, obviously it's a business book, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know that like the back of my
Same.
hand,
Yes.
right? Exactly. Right. This should be a
Yep.
piece of cake. But then you
Yeah.
have this sort of, you sit down, you get started, and you have a reckoning where you have to really
Yeah.
say, if I'm leaving this thing that's going to be my legacy, that my kids are going to look at and say, this is what my mom was about, how honest am I being, with myself
Mhm.
and everyone else about what it really takes to show up in this world, you know, as a person who, quote unquote, balances it all, and
Yep.
around that same questioning of myself, I went through a divorce, and it was like right post pandemic, and I was just getting into this process, and I was like, oh boy, I don't want to do anything. This is unexpected. I didn't, all of this, like my heart's broken,
Right.
and I've got to manage these babies. And that was when I said, it's not even responsible for me to tell people, let me say it over. It's not even responsible for me to tell people to aspire to the life I have without telling them what it cost me and what I've learned
Yeah.
so far. So that's what
Wow.
Nothing is Missing about, is recognizing, there is an expense, to
Yeah.
choosing a certain life, but can it be worth it? Can it be fruitful? And can you learn how to treat yourself with grace?
Yeah. What was like some of the lessons you learned in the writing process? Because every single author that I speak with has this, this message and this mission. And that's the only reason why anyone would ever write a book, is if that message and mission were strong enough. And yet, in the writing process, as it unfolds, I feel like God, the universe, everything is aligning to make sure, like, are you sure about this lesson? Are you sure? What were some of those things that you learned through the writing process of your memoir?
I think the biggest one is granting myself some grace, and it
Mm,
was something that just kept coming up, because one of the things that happens when you're writing a memoir versus a business book is it's
yeah.
like you're being called to walk into the rooms of the toughest moments of your life. You get to also experience some of the
Yeah.
joyous moments again, but the
Yeah.
toughest moments, but you have to not get lost in those moments. So I can't emotionally go all the way there, but I also have to describe them vividly enough that I can bring other people in with me to understand. And you have to extract the lessons and any applicable tools. So it's really, really difficult. But what I found was, in order for me to get through that journey, I had, God, a therapist, and friends, but I also had to really give myself grace. I mean, there were
Yeah.
so many rooms I walked into, from growing up as, the child of immigrants trying to figure it all out in Washington, D.C., and seeing myself suffer without meals and, struggle with sleeping on a couch until I was 12, all the way to looking at some elements of my divorce and seeing how I was showing up in my marriage and what the outcome was of that, and really saying to myself, I empathize with that girl, or that woman,
Yeah.
who was in that moment. And I realized that should have been granting myself grace as I went along. So my book is very grace infused, so that wherever people are, they can find a little bit of ease, as they're going through the difficult things.
I love, Nicole, that you're talking about what people don't see, right? Because like you and I, we are open books. Like literally, we are very open books about every facet of our lives. Somebody literally messaged me today and was like, "What size bra do you wear?" And I just messaged back.
Oh yeah, me
You
too.
know,
I say the same thing, because they're like looking
yeah,
at an outfit, like, and as a girlfriend, we
yes,
get it. You know what I mean?
yes,
It's a thing,
yes. I'm like, I get it.
Yep.
I shall tell you.
Yep.
And there are so many benefits to that, because I think people do get to see more of the picture. But I want to kind of go deeper on what you were talking about like what you lose and what is the cost of entrepreneurship and dream chasing and pivoting and trying all these things. What are some things that you think most entrepreneurs that are aspiring entrepreneurs don't even consider when they are starting a business or with this big dream of what their life is going to turn into?
I think the number one thing that people don't realize is that you discover for the first time your limit at burnout when you hit burnout. And as
Yes.
much as everyone can tell you and point out the different signposts and say, hey, ease up, this is that, part of I hate to say it, but doing entrepreneurship well the first time around is that
Yeah.
you kind of push yourself. It's how do I know what my max is? And it's
Mhm.
this hardwiring of being excited and driven, and this newness and this ambition and this drive. And you don't even realize you're doing it until you get there, And
Yep.
what I've learned is that same knowledge, once you have it, of, oh, I went too far,
Yeah.
starts showing up in other places, where you're able to say, oh, this was an event that I shouldn't have missed. This was a friend that I needed to follow up with. That was an opportunity I should have gone to. And if you're smart and you're paying attention to the feeling that you get, it's a similar feeling throughout the journey of life. And you start learning, that is how you learn to prioritize. So it's like when I knew what burnout felt like within my business, it was easier for me to identify it in my personal life. Like, oh, this marriage is burning me out. You know what I mean? Like this form of parenting is burning me out, and then I was like, I kind of know what I need to do to get back. But that was like probably the biggest thing that I've learned along the way, that I wish people knew, that it's not something that you can buy our easy hack to figure out your non-burnout systemization and automation, whatever, like not real life. You're going to burn out, but once you know better, you got to do better.
I love that. I actually have a part in my book where I talk about, I was like at this conference and literally every speaker went up and their story was about how they hit burnout. And I had this moment of like, is that a requirement? Like, is that a requirement? And at some point I do think it is, because nowadays everything is so polarizing, right? And it's like that hustle culture versus the manifestation side of things. And I feel like those are two different camps specifically for women entrepreneurs. And I think that there is such a beautiful blend that can happen. I think the hustle is required to get the dream off the ground, but at some point you have to start envisioning what success feels like for you, right? Because I think the hustle side is that masculine energy that so many of us start with, that gusto of like, I remember sleeping with my camera on my nightstand. Like,
yes,
I loved
it
so much that I was like, I'm going to shoot any time of day so I can learn this. And it's just that really interesting dichotomy of like, okay, I love how you talk about sometimes you do got to hit it to get the breakthrough, but then better. And a lot of people don't necessarily take those lessons. And even before we started this interview, I was like, okay, when is your hard stop on this book promo? Because we've all learned, like, we go hard, right? Especially when we care about something so deeply. And so it's like, what's the hard stop? Because so many of us, it's like we have to have those checks and balances, or else we are going to do it again and again and again.
Yes. And I think that this also because we've both been in this game for a while. And what's nice when people listen is we operate at the higher level, so we are doing that work. And the number one thing that we ask each other whenever we meet someone who is a peer is, but how are you really doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, we're not asking. It's funny because people think when they get in the rooms, with people who are the multi-million-dollar hitting all the things, that we're all sitting there saying like, so what hashtags do you think are trending right now? Like, right. So what do you think right now is the number one tool that's going to get you to say, like, yes, there is an element of that type of mastermind, but most of the time it starts with like, girl, you okay? Because you just came out of the launch. Have you taken a break? We're checking, we're level setting for each other because we know, and you're right about the balance. I don't think that there are enough people with a large platform that, and it's one of the things I love about you, that talk about, it's a little of column A and a little of column B. In my book, I talk about seasonality. You should be working in seasons. It's not a continuum of the same energy. And eventually, as you're working through these seasons, you should be taking time to identify your priorities and then aligning with those priorities. So for me, and this is, I think can be cringy to some moms' ears, but I always try to keep it pretty forthright. I identified in the past 3 years, one of my priorities was me. And that is crazy because people always say like, oh, it's your family first, or, how serious is your business and all that. But, none of those things exist if I'm not here. And we say family all the time, but we talk about family as this unit we serve. We don't include ourselves as part of family. And so, I really made myself and my health and my wellness a priority, especially through this book writing process so that I could be here, to serve my purpose.
Dude, my book was like the reason why I started my health journey, because I didn't have enough energy. Like, I was like, I want to get this out into the world and I need energy to do that. And like, I need to figure out how to have energy like that. I so relate to that. One thing about your story that I really love, and I want to talk a little bit more so I can understand and learn. So both of your parents were immigrants and they were entrepreneurs. And I feel like that isn't super traditional, coming from a different country and becoming an entrepreneur. What did they teach you? Were they excited when you made the leap, or did they want more of that structured life? Like, talk to me a little bit about that background.
So, I think what's interesting is whenever I share the story of my parents, so many people find alignment, right? Because
Yeah.
whether you like have old school parents or Southern parents, or you're a parent yourself, you want the best for your kids,
Yeah.
and I think that we've come into an age of conscious parenting where now we're like, but we want them to define what the best is for them. And we want them to lean into their gifts, which is a beautiful thing. But
Yeah.
that's not how I grew up. My parents are like, my daughter, you are my 401k plan. Like that was how
Yes.
that worked. We put everything into you, girl, you better output, and that was mixed, like on some level, it made me feel like I had a really rigid, plan for myself because I had this sort of obligation to this, label, of being
Yeah.
this firstborn caregiver. But I also got to benefit from watching my parents' work ethic. So my dad was an entrepreneur, but in an unconventional way. He was a cab driver,
Yeah.
and that meant that he controlled his own schedule. That meant that
Yeah.
he could, start and stop when he wanted, but he felt like he had the safety and structure of a pre-existing organization, and that was very reflective of who he was. He didn't want the
Yeah.
anxiety and fear. He didn't trust he could do it himself, but this gave him just enough that he felt good within what he was doing. And then my mom was an entrepreneur in a way that I think is far more familiar and that I identify with, and I talk about in my book a lot. Uh, that she had the 9 to 5 job as a secretary at a boating insurance company, but she also had little side hustles that she would run, where she was either, helping friends with little things. Or in one story I tell in my book, we go back to Ghana, West Africa, and we're walking through Market Circle where, there are all these stalls with all these foods and all these vendors. And we stop in front of a specific stall. And when we get there, I and my mind's blown because she's collecting money from this woman and talking to her about the, how things are set up, and which, as we both know, in
Yeah.
from technical Harvard Business School terms, she's talking to her about merchandising. She's,
Yeah.
talking to her about overhead and margins and all these things, that are very much official things that she just knew, and
Wow.
that was when I was like, oh, there's something to this,
Yeah.
and she's the one that I really lean on when I think of my first entrepreneurial mentor.
I love that. What does it feel like? Because one thing I don't think women talk about enough is that you've had so many different identity shifts. And I think there's a lot of fear and maybe even stigma around the word identity for women, because I feel like a lot, maybe it's society, patriarchy, maybe it's just our own like safety. We often want to like cling to one title, one easy descriptor of like, here's who I am and here's what I do. We've all learned the elevator pitch talk. What has it felt like? Because you have really been through an evolution, not just in business, but in the roles you play in life. What has that felt like as you've shifted identities so much?
Sure. So I think that one of the things that has been really beautiful about the entrepreneurial journey, I started off as a blogger, just like we all start somewhere, right? And,
Yep.
but I was doing that on the side while working corporate. And one of the things that, I think a lot of people don't realize maybe about the me's and the you's, are that
Yeah.
everyone may see and identify us and label us a certain way, but our personal goals are in our head. So when I started blogging, a lot of people were like, "Oh, she's aiming to be the best blogger out there. She wants to be the best hair blogger in the world." I wasn't even
Yep.
thinking about that. I was
Yeah.
following my own journey to learn about what I was doing to, generate some income because I understand the value of money as a tool. But I never at any point was set on that, and I'll say it here now, my goal in everything I do now is obviously to be excellent where I am. It matters to me if I'm going to write a book that it is the best book I could write, that is
Yeah.
impactful, meaningful, and creates change and contributes to my legacy and the legacy of my children. But I want to be a philanthropist. I want to make enough money in this world that I can solve problems without bureaucracy or paperwork, and that is the ultimate goal. And I don't care how I get there. I can get there by selling apple pies. I can get there by selling books. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I want to be able to ease suffering in this world and not have to worry about, getting permission to do so, and having the resources to do so. And so if that's my end goal, everything I'm doing is aligned with that, and that's something I've
Mhm.
said for, I had an essay I wrote in 10th grade where I wrote that, I just want to do good in this world, and so
Yeah.
I think that what's interesting about sort of, wait, I forgot the question.
Just about the I no about like your identity shifts and
identity,
stuff.
right.
Yes,
So
I got
edit
you.
that part out. I have to sound like I know what I'm talking about. Okay.
I got you.
So when it comes to identity shifts, I think if we're able to figure out and hold to our core who we really are, then as we sort of travel through our purpose, aiming for an eventual destination, our purpose will evolve. It's not finding your purpose. You are in your purpose every day, whether you are serving your kids a sandwich, or serving
Yeah.
an audience a course. You're in your purpose every day, but eventually, hopefully, you arrive at the thing that really makes your heart sing because you feel like this is what it was all worth.
I love that. And I think a lot of people don't have a deep enough why that like keeps them tethered when the path gets windy. Like I feel like that is where so many people get wrong, or they have a why that isn't actually in alignment with them. So they reach it and they're like, well, this isn't what I thought it was. So maybe I just got to go harder or do more. And so I love that it's almost like this umbrella of like, this is my why. And like everything can fall under this, but it's all going towards the same spot. I think that's super
But it
powerful.
doesn't mean we don't drift from it either. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because you
Right.
can get like lost in the sauce, So like
Yeah.
I first got into entrepreneurship and I was like, this is so dope. I can't believe I can make this money and I'm helping people and it's a win for everyone and it feels so
Yeah.
good. And, I could do this forever. I felt the same way in corporate. I was like, I love this company. Like, I love my coworkers. I love this. I could do this forever, And you start realizing that if there's anything you can do, it's hold on to the fluidity of your
Yeah.
identity, allow yourself. And divorce was a blessing in that respect because I was able to decide, what do I want to bring with me with intention and what do I
Yeah.
want to leave behind in this next chapter of my life, so you get to do that every single day. And I don't think enough of us enjoy that privilege that we have.
Yes, it's like there's so much resistance to the reinvention, but I actually think the reinvention is like the gift. Like I think it's
Yes, yes. I call
powerful.
my book a fresh start manual because it literally is a diary of starting over. And starting over has
Yeah.
such negative connotations where it's like, oh, your launch was terrible, you got to start over. You left your company, got to start over. Your marriage didn't work, you got to start over. And it's like, no, like starting over is the greatest gift because you get to bring all the knowledge you had before and you get to apply it with intentionality for the life you want. And that's what I get to show people in this book.
Let's talk about starting because I feel like there are people listening right now to this podcast who have listened for many episodes and they've never taken action. Like they've disqualified themselves from whatever race they want to run before it's even began. Why do you think women are so resistant to even starting or trying?
Honestly, I think it's the idea, and I was talking about this literally yesterday. I think it's this
Yeah.
idea that women are best served if they are setting themselves on fire to keep other people warm. So this idea that we ever want to start something that might be aligned with doing for ourselves or around our own intentions, our own goals, it's like, whoa, 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 sister. You know what I mean? Like, but what about doing for your family first? What about doing for your church first? What about doing for your spouse first? Like, that's giving selfish energy, sis. You know what I mean? I'm picking
Yeah.
up it's all about me vibes. Like,
Yeah.
and the thing that's crazy about that is I cannot imagine I don't know how to explain this. I cannot imagine a segment of the population that is better equipped to do for others, while doing for themselves. Because if we take good care of ourselves, we literally are the ones that are mothering the people in the world. Like, I mean, there are grown men who are calling their parents, saying I need advice in the
Yeah.
highest echelons of society, like
Yeah.
my fiance called his mother the other day to ask her what permanent press was on the washing machine. You know what I mean? Like we're still out
Right.
here doing good work in all stages. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so the idea that we are only so good in how we are productive and serve others is so short-sighted because the more that we elevate ourselves as women, the better we can show up in this world. The better the world
Hmm.
moves forward. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to see people not start simply because they're saying, well, I'm not allowed, I'm not permitted, I can't even get paid for this. Like, that's bananas. Like, sis, get paid.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's so much to unpack with that too because I feel that like someone recently reached out and I was like, I feel like I'm coming out of the fog. Like my baby's almost 2 and I am finally feeling, and it's wild how we kind of get into these seasons where you're like, don't even realize like, oh my gosh, like I am always needed. I'm always wanted. I'm never off. Yes. Yes. And it's very similar to what we were talking about earlier with like the burnout of like, sometimes you got to hit that to have the breakthrough. And I think it's so powerful because what you're saying too is like, we've all heard, you know, the oxygen mask and all of those different metaphors of like, you've got to fill up your cup. But I also think I heard this quote recently where it was like, instead of thinking, have I worked enough to earn rest? Have I rested enough to do my best work? And I loved it because I was like, man, how many of us, like every time I sit down, I'm like, oh, there's another load of laundry. Oh, I got to write another outline. I got to, you know, and it's like, wait a minute though. Have I rested enough to do the best work that I can? And I feel like we're on the cusp of that shift. And I think we're pioneering that in so many ways. But I also think that we're going to see like this new movement of women like coming fully alive without apologizing. And I'm very excited for it.
Absolutely. And it all starts with the root of understanding our sole purpose in this world as women is not productivity for others.
Yeah.
You know, like that's just, we're not here to see what we can, it's not a race to see what you can create. You know, that's not it. So that's it's so good. Just got back from London and I was so jet lagged. Like I was so tired, and I'm in the week of my book launch, which you know what that's like. It's literally back to back to back everything. And I literally told my assistant, I said, you know, clear my calendar. Like I need to sleep today. And you know, I know that might mean that it's going to be even more packed later. I know that might mean I might miss an opportunity, but what I also know is I am so jet lagged. If I show up today, it's not going to be my best and I may not make it through, and it matters to me more that I am well, you know. And that was in such a high pressure, important season of my life, that was such an affirmation to my personal worth, and that no, I am worthy of rest, you know. And that like that loving of myself was something that I felt was a great action item to show that I've really learned and I'm applying the things I talk about in this book. You know, it makes my suffering in the past worth it because I'm applying the change.
Talk to me about what someone can expect when they pick up your book. Again, it is Nothing is Missing, a memoir of living boldly. What is waiting for them inside of these pages?
So it's a riveting story. I mean, the way that people describe it is it's unputdownable, you know, and that they find themselves pausing in moments to cry, to laugh, you know, to take notes in the columns and circle things and highlight. And that's really exciting for me because I think engaging with a memoir on that level is not common. A lot of times it feels like you're just watching a really good movie, you know, and boy, this story is so good, but you can't really put yourself in it or align. And I'm so grateful because I have lived the type of life where everyone can truly find it. We always joke that I'm like the United Nations of people, right? Like I, you know, converted from Judaism, well, converted to Judaism, then from Judaism, then, you know, I've been in an interfaith, interracial marriage. I adopted my girls, but now I want to have biological babies. I grew up super poor, but then I was the 1%. You know, my parents are African immigrants, but I was born in America. I mean, literally, you can find a piece of yourself in this story. And I think that it's so powerful because the way that I like to describe it is you read this story, but it's like sitting down across from one of your best girlfriends who's like, girl, I know you're going through it, but listen, you know, this is what I want you to know, but also know that even if you don't get it all, there's grace in the understanding. You know, you'll come back to this book again. You know, you'll come back to it when you have your first baby. You'll come back to it when you launch your first business. You'll come back to it when you send your kid off into the world. You'll come back to it when you get divorced. You know, it becomes a fresh start manual where you're able to say, yes, I can do it, because fresh starts are common, and I will not absorb the messaging that this is the end for me. You know, it is possible for me to just keep making bold decisions and get to where I want to be.
Oh, I'm so excited for everyone to get their hands on this book. Where can everybody connect with you, learn more about you, follow you, get their hands on your book? Give us all the places.
Oh, you're the best. You can grab the book at nothingismissingbook.com, and anywhere that books are sold. You know, if you just go in there, it'll be there on a shelf. And then you can follow me all around the internet at Nicole Walters.
Oh, Nicole, it's about time. And this lived
it's
up
about
to
that
everything
time
and more of what I had hoped for. I am so grateful to have had the chance to connect with you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for coming on, Gold Digger.
Jenna, you're the best. Thanks for having me.
Even still to this day, I feel like health and wellness is so confusing because it's so bio-individual that you can't really say one diet for everybody, one way of working out.
Yes.
But with the biohacking world, it really focuses on optimization. And I think that's really an amazing thing to be thinking about. And I think more of us should be thinking about ways to just optimize and feel better.